You're extra welcome, and hopefully you go to a beer garden afterwards, if you're old enough to do that. Right, so I know there are regulars here, and there are people you've never seen before, so you're equally welcome. So ARK is a joint university undertaking and has existed since 2000. And we run 3 annual attitude surveys: the Life and Times survey, the Young Life and Times survey, and the Kids Life and Times survey. And we tend to bundle the results launch of the Kids Life and Times survey and the Young Life and Times survey together. And the main reason for that is that often funders come to us and want us to include questions in both the Kids Life and Times and the Young Life and Times survey. And that's what happened this year as well. So it's a good opportunity for people to find out about some of our key results before everybody else does, because from after this event, the survey results will be publicly available to anybody. The data sets, the technical reports, some of the key results tables, so anybody can now do with the data what they want to do. Up to now, only our funder could. And I'm going to talk about our funders in a minute. I have an assistant today upstairs, Johnny, up there, who will have to turn the slides for me because we lost the dongle that connects to the projector. Okay, so Johnny, if you want to move this on. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so Young Life and Times and Kids Life and Times survey. So we're talking about the 2024 survey results. These are annual surveys. The Kids Life and Times survey has been running since 2008, and the Young Life and Times survey has run since 2003. So my name is Dirk Schubotz. I'm the director of the Young Life and Times survey. Dr. Katrina Lloyd sits in the back there, and she's the director of the Kids Life and Times survey, and we all work in a team. Martina McKnight is there, Johnny is there, Mike, who is kindly recording the event today, not the discussion of questions, just me talking, is here as well. So we're working as a team on that and have done so for a long time. So I can't possibly present all the data included in all of the survey, in both of the surveys today. What I can do, I can give you a snapshot is the word I was looking for, of some of the survey results. And we are focusing on the data and the questions that were included in both of the surveys. So that's particularly education experiences, and we're looking at various education experiences, children's rights, and then we present some of the data that we know people are interested in from the Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times. We also publish, as I said, a lot of our survey results today in a number of publications. And you can move this on, Johnny. And these are the 3 publications that we're producing today. So it's a summary flyer which captures the main findings of all the question modules included in Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times here. So there's one for Young Life and Times and one for Kids Life and Times. And we are also very proud that we publish a research update today. And Christine Irwin from Marie Curie is here, has joined us. That's work that we've done together with Christine, Marie Curie, and concerns bereavement education, grief education, and bereavement experiences of 16-year-olds. So that's really important work that Marie Curie is rolling out at the moment in Northern Ireland, teacher education, and we wanted to capture young people's views and experiences on bereavement, but also their thoughts about grief education in school. So that's all publicly available today, and there are no official statistics for young people losing relatives or other important people for them. So that's why this work is really important to do, and randomized surveys like ours give an opportunity to collect this data. So this is available today from our websites. I start now by giving you a little bit of background of who took part in the surveys. So as I said already, Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times are both randomized surveys. So we take a random sample. In the case of Young Life and Times, we use a child benefit register, and we invite a quarter of all 16-year-olds who live in Northern Ireland to take part in the survey. In the case of Kids Life and Times, it's a school-based online survey, so all the children, including those who are homeschooled, are invited to take part in Kids Life and Times. You can see here the completion rates and the number of young people who took part. So 2,210 16-year-olds completed our surveys, and 4,360 P7 children completed our surveys. So that's approximately 17% of all P7 children. And with Young Life and Times, we had a response rate of 36%. So if you work this out with a number of people invited, it's about 1 in 10 of all 16-year-olds in Northern Ireland who took part in the Young Life and Times survey. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the wealth of questions that we included. So I've already mentioned the work with Marie Curie on grief education and bereavement experiences of young people. We have regular funding from the Executive Office and the Department of Education. The Executive Office funds our work on preventing violence against women and girls. And some of you may have heard that it seems that this program has made it into the program of government, and we will hopefully find out next week. And the Department of Education funds our work on shared education and community relations and equality education, and I will talk a little bit about that. The Executive Office also funds our work on community relations and minority ethnic groups, and again I'll show some of the data in relation to that. We had funding from the Integrated Education Fund, and I will talk a little bit more about that when we come to the tables. Again, there's new-ish legislation out, which puts more responsibility on the government here to encourage and fund integrated education. And we looked at different ways of capturing genuine interest in integrated education and the experience of young people in relation to that. So I will talk a little bit about that. And I need to mention also the Commission of Children, young people who funded our questions on young people's knowledge and understanding of children's rights. And Ohio University, yes, believe it or not, Ohio University funds us to ask questions on mental health, which I will not talk about today, but I can obviously answer questions. And finally, last but not least, the Department of Justice funds questions on as part of their Tackling Paramilitarism program. And we ask young people, so these are the 16-year-olds, questions on community safety and the experience of paramilitaries. John, yeah. Okay, so again, that gives you, I did say it was a random survey. We use random surveys. So this gives a little bit of background really about the diversity of children and young people that take part in our surveys. So with the Kids Life and Times, you can see that it's an equal gender balance. We capture the views of disabled children as well. So about 14% did say that they have a disability. You can see here the other columns. We capture a range of children with different experiences of who they live with. 76% live in the same house that both of their parents, but of course, about 1/4 don't. And also very important in terms of school experiences and so forth is that we have a good representation of children from all types of schools that we have in Northern Ireland, integrated, controlled, and Catholic maintained. So for Young Life and Times, similar statistics. If you run surveys which are not school-based, you're always likely to get more responses from young women. They for some reason seem to be more willing to participate in surveys or research of this kind. And that's the same in Young Life and Times. So young men are slightly overrepresented. But then if you look according to the grammar schools, the secondary and plants integrated, that captures really well what the school infrastructure in Northern Ireland is. And also in terms of their religious belonging, the Young Life and Times captures really the views from young people of different religious backgrounds, as you would expect. So we are quite confident with our samples. Okay, so I'm going to move into some of our survey findings. And as I said, I'm going to start with education, and then talk a little bit about rights, and then present some of the other findings that are also included in both of the surveys. Now we do this, those of you who are regulars and have been here before with us, what we sometimes do is we pick modules of questions and then talk about only education in kids' life and times and only education in young life and times and only community relations. We're not going to do that today. We'll try something different. We're trying to tell a story of the school system in Northern Ireland and what it is like and what young people's experiences and attitudes are using data from both young life and times and kids' life and times. And I hope it works. You can let me know if it works or not. Okay, here we go. School. So, we do know from official statistics that the school system in Northern Ireland is divided. It's divided across two main lines. It's divided by class or socioeconomic background, and it's divided by religion. Okay, but the two questions that are really important as well is the experience of young people and children, how they experience school. And the first slide here shows how happy children who are in P7 are in their school. And you can see that the large majority, and this is broken down by gender, right? There's always a perception that girls are much happier than boys in school, right? So the experiences are much better. Now, if you look at the kids' 11 times, P7, that is not the case, right? So you can see that the results are very similar. So 70% of the girls, but also 66% of the boys say that they are mostly happy in school. Now, the boys are indeed a little bit more unhappy, but only a little. Statistically, there's no difference. So that's good news. Okay, so generally, young people and children are happy in school. Now, we didn't ask the same question of the 16-year-olds, but we did ask the 16-year-olds what the first three words are. That's a question that we asked on behalf of the Integrated Education Fund, what the first three words are that come to their mind when they think about schools in Northern Ireland. And that's a very simple word cloud which shows what their experiences are. Now, when we did something like that in the past, the first question, the main word that came up was divided, right? So that was about 10 years ago when we asked this question before. Now, this does not come up at the moment. We do know from previous research that we have undertaken that young people at age 16, of course they're doing their GCSE, experience school largely as stressful for them. Okay, so then the GCSE year, and that's what this figure shows. But it also shows that the larger the word, the more people have used this word when they, as one of the three words. And you can see, and maybe to your big surprise, that actually a lot of young people have also experienced school as good, so they have a positive experience about school. Now there's all the other things about boring, and it's outdated, and it's too strict, and it's unfair, and there's pressure, and you can see all that. But what you see first is stressful, but also good. So it's not as straightforward as we may think. So school experiences seem to be generally positive. Now, I've alluded to the fact that we have two divisions. Now, we know we have official statistics that show that people from better off backgrounds are more likely to go to grammar schools. And we have official statistics that show that Catholics tend to go to Catholic schools and Protestants more to state-controlled schools. Now, we do capture that also in Young Life and Times when we ask what school type they attend. And you can see here, this is green. I'm not sure if you can see this as green because it's quite light, but the first graph shows that indeed 85% of Catholics say they go to a school which is predominantly Catholic, right? And only 6% go to a school which is mostly or all Protestant, and 6% of Catholics go to a school which is about half and half. Now, you will notice here that for Protestants, who are the ones who are in the orange column, surprisingly I picked orange for that and green for Catholic, this is very different, right? So there's a much more diverse experience for Protestants in terms of the type of school that they're going to. And our statistics, official statistics from the Department of Education would show that. Now the interesting aspect is perhaps here that we have about 27% of those who don't identify as Catholic, or in fact with any religion, also go to Catholic schools. So the biggest change perhaps is that we have a higher proportion of people who are not identifying as Catholic going to a Catholic school, predominantly Catholic school. And these 27%, we will see that later, might be 27% who don't practice their religion, but they're culturally Catholic still. So if that makes sense. So let's look at the next slide, which shows the socioeconomic division, and that breaks down our findings in terms of what type of school, in terms of the management type school young people attend, by their family financial background. So the first ones in red are the ones who are the poorest, right? So they're the poorest. We know from official statistics that the poorest people, young people, tend to go to secondary school, and that the better off people go to grammar schools. And you can see that here, right? So 65% of those who say that they are better off, come from financially better off backgrounds, go to grammar schools. Right? So our survey captures that quite well. There's very little difference in integrated schools, and of course integrated schools, we'll come to that later, are set up to tackle religious difference but also socioeconomic background, right? So you would, the people from the integrated education fund here are probably quite happy to see that, right? So that is a good mix, which is what the schools are set up to do. Okay, Johnny, and we know also, you've captured this for a long time, that's why you see here the 2003, that's the first time Young Life and Times was undertaken, and 2024 is there. We've asked the same question every year. Would you like to go to a religiously mixed school or a school of only your own religion? Okay, so there are two things that are noticeable about that slide. And that's broken down by, that also shows the desire to live in a mixed religion neighborhood and work in a mixed religion workplace, right? So schools are the blue column at the bottom. So we started off in 2003 at the lowest point compared to the others. 48% of young people in 2003 said that they would like to go to a mixed religion school. Now if you look at 2024, the label is cut off, but I can tell you that's 49%. So in the 21 years that we've had of peace process and capturing the data, there's been virtually no change, right? So it's not the case that young people who have grown up now, who are 60 now, who were born after the ceasefire, desire mixed religion schools, or in fact neighborhoods or workplaces more than the young people who were 16 in 2003. So there's been virtually no change in any of these areas. If anything, the proportion of young people who say they want to work in a mixed religion workplace and live in a mixed religion neighborhood has gone down a little bit over time, right? So that's the first point. But the second point is that, of course, if you look at the proportions, they are still significantly higher than the experience of young people. Okay, so we have 49%, that's half of the 16-year-olds who would like to go to a school with this mixed religion, but we know that in fact only about 10% do, right? So there's no change in terms of attitude, but of course we are still a long way from achieving a situation that the young people actually desire. Okay, and now I'm starting to show you a few figures, and I hope it's not too much. So that again is a question, and we haven't asked that before, whether young people had any say in their decision making on what school they go to after primary school. And that's quite interesting to look at as well. So there's a perception that people from not so well off backgrounds have much less say than the people from the well off backgrounds. No. If you compare here the breakdown in the second half of the table, the financial background, you can see there's statistically no difference. So people from not well off backgrounds have just as much say as people from well off backgrounds. So there's no difference, okay, statistically. You can see that there's a slightly higher proportion that they can't remember whether they had a say, right? And that's it, everything else is the same. Now, the more interesting data is probably in the first half of the table. And you can see that 83% of the grammar school kids said, so those are the ones who attended grammar school, said that they were asked what school they wanted to go to, and they did get into the school, right? So the proportion of the ones who said they were asked and they also got into the school they wanted is highest in grammar schools. But of course that is because they do have a choice. I remember when the shared education policy was launched all these years ago by Queen's University, There was a lot of emphasis in the policy put on choice, that it's important to maintain a choice, that we can choose our school. And this data here shows that, of course, choice is very practical and real for people who maybe have the resources and can choose the grammar school they want to go to. If you go to a secondary school because you didn't pass a test, or because you don't have the resources to be driven to a grammar school, then choice becomes quite a theoretical concept, right? So you have no choice. The interesting aspect here for the last one that I wanted to highlight is that actually the highest proportion of those who went to integrated schools said that they weren't asked by their parents what school they want to go to, right? So that's an interesting one that we probably need to explore a little bit more with qualitative data that we don't have available. But one of the possible explanations is that the parents felt quite passionate about integration. And they thought, no, this is the school you're going to, because we think this is important that you go to that school. Okay. But it's interesting to look at the next slide, Johnny. And I apologize for that. I have to talk a little bit more, explain it. But we also asked the young people afterwards, so if you could choose now, what are the aspects of the school that are important, and what were the reasons why the school that was chosen at the time by your parents was the school you went to? Now, the scale here, the shorter the line, the more important was the aspect, right? The longer the line, so 1 is very important, 2 is important, 3 is not very important, and 4, which is missing and nobody has that, is not important at all. So what you can see here, the blue lines are the ones when the school was chosen by the parents, when they were 11 years old, right? So what you can see here, the most important aspects when the school was chosen when the child was 11 or 10 was the good reputation of the school, the subject choice, and also to an extent that friends attended it. Okay, so the friends also went to the same school. Now, if you ask the young people now, if you could choose your school now, which is a red line, so the interesting ones are the ones where the lines get shorter. Okay, and the noticeable ones are subject choice. So at age 16, subject choice is even more important than it was at the time. But what also is interesting is that the religious mix of the school becomes much more important than it was at age 11. Obviously, easy to get to, it's still an important factor. Pastoral care is also important, becomes more important now. But the really interesting ones are the lines that become shorter. Subject choice, religious ethos, it becomes actually less important than it was at the time, but that the school is religiously mixed becomes more important, right? So we probably do a little bit more work on that before, maybe write this up as a research update. But it's the first time that we ever asked, why was your school chosen? What were the reasons why you chose the school? And if you could choose again, how would you choose now, right? And that hopefully feeds into some of the work we've done recently, or again with the Integrated Education Fund, about actually measuring the proper demand for integrated education. People say they like mixed religion schools, but mixed religion schools is only one aspect of a school. There are other important things as well. Pastoral care, subject choice, easy to get to, friends are also going, and we need to see all of that in combination. Okay, that's enough on that, I think. Now, also a really important question is whether identity is actually, and personal views are actually respected in the school. And this table presents that broken down by integrated grammar and secondary schools and overall. So overall, 15% agree and strongly agree that their views are respected. And if you add the ones who agree, we are well over 50%, well over half. It's actually quite good to see that only 18%, so that's less than 1 in 5, say that their views are not respected in the school they go to. There's very little difference between the school types. Okay, so the one to point out is that Those who attend secondary schools are slightly less likely to say that their views are respected in their schools. But generally speaking, if you were doing a statistical test, there's no difference between the school types, which again, I suppose is a good news story. Okay, the next one is then to look whether respondents agree that their personal identity and views are respected by religious background. And I've put 3 figures here in red to highlight that there is still, to an extent, a problem. So 63% of Catholics do say that their views and identities are respected in Catholic schools, but only 48% of Catholics say that, of Catholics who attend predominantly Protestant schools would say that, and mixed religion schools. And the same pattern is true for Protestants going to largely Protestant schools, and interestingly enough, for pupils with no religious background attending mixed religion schools. So there is still a bit of an issue that the views of the Catholics and their identities are more respected in Catholic schools and respectively for Protestant schools. Could look at the next slide. Okay, and then it's a more direct question. It's not a question about mixed religion school, it's about integrated education. So the new policy and law says that government should encourage and support integrated education. And we asked young people whether they strongly agreed with that or disagreed with that. And you can see here that there's overwhelmingly an agreement with that policy. If you add the strongly agrees with the agrees, you can see that over half of all young people of all religious backgrounds agree or strongly agree that this should indeed be the government's job to encourage and support integrated education. Now, unsurprisingly, that view is much stronger amongst those who have no religious background, right? So neither Catholics nor Protestants. So over 70%, nearly 3/4 of those who have no religious background feel that way. There's very, very little disagreement amongst anybody, Catholic, Protestant, or those with no religion, that the government should not do that. And then we looked at support for integration by socio-economic background. Again, as I said, that's the second important dividing line. And integrated education is not just integration by religion; it's also integration by class. That's what integration does. Okay, socio-economic integration as well. And we have very similar findings. There's no significant difference in terms of the support for integration between those who are not well off, red, average well off, orange, or well off, green. So there's a slightly higher proportion of those from well off backgrounds who are in support of integrated education. But you could not say certainly that those who are from not well off backgrounds are not in support, quite the opposite. So, I mean, 62% of those from not well off backgrounds are still agreeing or strongly agreeing that the government should encourage and support integrated education. Okay, another Young Life and Times one, and that's also interesting. So we are looking at the experiences of those who are in the school at the moment. Would you like your current school that you attend to be an integrated school? And of course we have some who are already in integrated schools. Okay, and we have those who are not. Okay. So you can see that 30% of those who 30% of those from Catholic schools of Catholics feel that the current school should be integrated. 25% who are currently in Protestant or state-controlled schools, and 41% who have no religious background feel that the current school that they're in should be integrated. Now, these are the ones who are already in integrated schools at the moment, and you can see that again, those who have no religious background stronger agree that the current school that is already integrated that they prefer to be integrated. There's a very, very small proportion of 16-year-olds here, 2%, 3%, 1% respectively, who say they're currently in an integrated school and they would prefer that it wasn't. Okay, so overall, again, if government needs data to support the strategy, well, there it is. Okay. And this is looking at the financial well-being. And the background, same question again, should the current school be integrated? The better off are more likely to agree than those who are not so well off. But overall, if you can look here, so these are the young people who are in schools that are currently integrated and they prefer that. So here you can see that 22% of those from not well-off background are in support of that. Okay. I'm moving to, so integrated education is one of the policy areas that we have at the moment. The other one that we wanted to look at is shared education. Again, as I mentioned, we had funding from the Department of Education to do that. This is a definition that was provided to both children, P7 children and 16-year-olds. And here on the right-hand side, you can see that 62% of the Young Life and Times participants and 56% of the P7 children took part in shared education according to this definition. So that's basically three aspects or four aspects. It's either you have shared classes with people from other schools, you have shared projects, you share facilities like sports grounds or computers or things like that, or you've done something else. But the proportion of those who've done something else is really small. Okay. This is now looking at kids' life and times and young life and times in terms of what aspects of shared education they've been involved in. And you can see here that 53% of the young life and times and 41% of the kids' life and times respondents had classes. The large proportion of young life and times had projects together with people from other schools, much higher than in kids' life and times. And also shared facilities is much higher in young life and times than it is in kids' life and times due to the nature of course, post-primary education is organized and segregated schools, of course. And then, as I said, about 1 in 10 did something else. This shows us whether they actually like shared education. Okay, and these are the young people who said they liked it a little or a lot combined. And you can see that over 3/4 of both the kids' life and times and young life and times respondents liked doing projects, slightly lower but very similar of those liked classes with other schools, and over 70% also liked sharing facilities. I would have my questions about that, but well, that's what they say. So they like sharing facilities. Okay, in the next slide we're looking at whether, as a result of shared education, the young people and the kids feel that they have more respect for the views of others. And again, these are all the answer options, but if you look at the strongly agree and the agree, you can see that over half of the young life and times respondents and 75%, 65%, so that's nearly 2/3 of the kids' life and times respondents said that they agree or strongly agreed that after doing shared education, they are better able to respect views of others, which is, I suppose, a really, really positive outcome. At the other end, you can see that the proportion of those who disagree or strongly disagree is really very small. And the next slide, we've looked at the overall experience. So that's sort of the closing question in the shared education module. Whether, considering everything, young people and children are favorable or not favorable about shared education overall. And you can see again that about 50%, just over 50% of the 16-year-olds and 44% of the P7 children feel favorable or very favorable about shared education, the experience overall. Slightly less than the data that I presented in the previous slide, but still overall quite positive experience, I suppose, looking at that. Okay, One of the issues, and you will be aware of that, is the shared campus. There's a big discussion about should we have an integrated school or could we have shared education in the same campus, and what should this look like? And there are different aspects a shared campus could have. So shared campus and shared education means that the schools are still separate schools, but in the same location. So you could have the same entrance, you could have use the same facilities, you can have a dinner hall that you share, a dining hall, you could share the school bus, or have actually the same school uniform. And we asked young people for their attitudes towards that. And you can see that overall, here at this point, the 16-year-olds are significantly more likely to favor all of these options or aspects of a shared education campus. Okay. The P7 children are much less likely to be in favor of that, but perhaps at this point we probably need to think about them being P7 children, and it's quite difficult to imagine how that would look like. It's much easier to imagine and understand the consequences of a shared school bus when you're 16 than when you're P7 and probably brought to school by your parents. So all of that, we should not very easily say that when you're 16 you're more in favor of a shared campus and all these aspects of a shared campus. I think it needs to be seen in the context of the age of the respondents at this point. Okay, and I think at this point I want to show you a graph which I find really interesting. So with different policies and possibilities of bringing young people of different backgrounds together. So we talked about integrated education, we talked about shared education, and of course the Executive Office also funds TBAC. So these are projects that young people can undertake in the summer camps and things like that. So when you look in isolation at the questions and young people's experience or children's experience of shared education and integrated education, has it made any difference? They will always say, yes, it has made a difference to our attitudes. Yes, we understand others better than before. So this is all positive. But if you look at the actual attitudes, for example, on whether religion is going to make a difference, always going to make a difference on Northern Ireland, people relate to Northern Ireland to each other, then actually you see no difference. Okay? It makes no difference whether you go to whether you have a TBAC project or not. 79% of those who did a TBAC project said religion will always make a difference, compared to 77% who didn't take part in TBAC. Okay? 75% of those who did take part in shared education and did projects, which is one of the main ways of sharing, said religion is always going to make a difference. 77% who did have shared classes with other young people said it's always going to make a difference. But only 75% of those who didn't do any of that said religion is always going to make a difference. Okay, so I think we need to, I know, Nicola, you have a round table on TBAC coming up next week. So I think we need to look at, I'm not questioning these programs, that's not the purpose of that. But the purpose of that is to say, we need to think about these programs and what the outcomes are that we want from these programs. Right? So young people always report positive experiences, and they say, yes, it improves our attitudes, it improves our views, but if you compare the views, and that's one of the main policy indicators, is religion in Northern Ireland going to make a difference forever, how people feel about each other? They don't appear to make any difference whatsoever. Okay, so let's have a conversation about what we do with these programs and what these programs are supposed to achieve. Okay, and again, I just want to emphasize and do that specifically because I know it's going to be available on camera. I'm not proposing that we shouldn't have these programs. I'm proposing that we need to think about what the outcomes are that we're looking at, that we want to consider. Okay, I'm moving away from education now, and I want to talk a little bit about children's rights, which is really important. Of course, we've already talked about children's say in school charts, which of course is a very important aspect of children's rights as well. But there are other aspects, and the two first aspects that I want to look at are awareness. We've asked these questions for a number of years now, and that's important for young people's advocacy groups. You're from the Department of Education, and then more and more advocacy groups for voluntary sector organizations, but also in the departments. Involvement in children, of young people is much more practiced than in the past, which is really positive. And here's a question about awareness of the UNCRC, which is the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Child. You can see here that the majority of both Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times respondents are not aware of it. Okay, so for the new commissioner who started last year, there's work to be done in terms of awareness raising for the UNCRC, and there's work to be done in the schools, of course, about that as well. Now, this gets worse when it comes to NICI. Awareness of the Commissioner, or the Office of the Commissioner of Children and Young People in Northern Ireland. So 73% of children who are in P7 and 62% of 16-year-olds are not aware of NICI. You've never heard about it. Okay. So that probably will concern the Commissioner, I would imagine. And I would imagine there will be a campaign to raise awareness about that. Now, we have more rights respect in schools now than ever before, so you would like to think that there's awareness campaign going on, but obviously it passes by the majority of young people and children. Okay, and then we asked whether they knew, if they knew that there was a commissioner, what the commissioner does. Now here is better news, because the majority knew what the job of the commissioner is, to promote the rights of children and young people. No, it doesn't carry out school inspections, and no, he doesn't give money to children and young people for projects. That's the job in the middle, and the majority of our respondents, both Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times. Actually, Kids Life and Times is slightly below 50%, but certainly the majority of 16-year-olds either knew or had an educated guess. So one of the two. Okay. Now that's something we've never asked before. The ways young people communicate with each other and with organizations has changed, and we asked what way they would like to receive information from the commissioner about rights and programs and support and things like that. And you can see that for both children in the Kids Life and Times survey, but also for young people in Young Life and Times, school remains the preferred avenue to receive information. And this is by a long shot. The next preferred option for Young Life and Times respondents and Kids Life and Times respondents, although the proportion is very different, is through social networking sites. And that excluded the NICI website. We also asked how they would like to contact NICI if they wanted to speak to the commissioner. That's at the bottom of the table here. And again, you can see that the majority of them wanted to do that through the school, 54% Young Life and Times and 40% Kids Life and Times. Some still want to write letters, allegedly. We didn't ask about the delivery method, whether it's by owl or in a different way, but 10% of the Young Life and Times respondents and 80% of the Kids Life and Times respondents want to send letters. Email is probably, after school, the preferred method of getting in touch with the commissioner. Okay, now I've talked long enough, so I'm going to present some other findings that we also included and that hopefully you find interesting. The first one is, and I've talked to some of you before we started with the event, really important work that we are involved with ARK, and it's around gender-based violence, or the violence against women and girls. And I believe, as I said earlier, that there's an announcement forthcoming next week where this becomes one of the main areas of work for government to work on reducing the experience of violence against women and girls. You can see here we captured the experience of males versus females. Now this was only questions that were in Young Life and Times. Whether they've experienced physical, sexual, psychological, online violence. Now let's start with the good news here, which is the bottom. That 49%, now some of you may think that's not good news, that's bad news, but 49% of 16-year-olds said they have not experienced any type of gender-based violence. Males are much more likely to experience physical violence than females, and we probably expect that. All the other types of violence are much more likely to be experienced by females. And these are all 16-year-olds, and this is like the last 12 months. And particularly concerning is probably the proportion of females that experience online violence. Okay, now I'm coming back slightly to school, because schools can be quite resistant about talking about these things in school. They think that's nothing to do with us, and this is not our job. We're not trained to do that. It's not something that we should tackle. It's to do with other programs. Now, if you look at this here, the graph shows clearly that the majority of males, but also females, experience all these types of violence in school. So I certainly feel that if that is what the experience of 16-year-olds are, then school ought to do something about it. If this experience happens in school, then school ought to address it. And we need programs to do that. I've already talked about online violence. Here, as you can see, the difference between males and females, and 46% of females, which is astonishing. Nearly half of them, every 1 or 2 girls, have experienced some type of online violence in the last 12 months. Okay. Something that I wanted to put in, and that's data that we collect on behalf of the executive office as well, is attitudes towards migrant groups and asylum seekers, and that's to do with, I wanted to put that and present it, because we recently had these violent incidents here in Northern Ireland. And so this captures the attitudes, and I put this in a slightly different slide, because these are stuck graphs which show how many young people strongly agree with these statements. And the first statement that we ask is that we have the duty as a society in Northern Ireland to protect and provide protection for asylum seekers. And you can see if you add that 33% to the 22%, that 55%, that's over half of the 16-year-olds, agree. Now, if you go at the top of the graph, there's 15% who disagree or strongly disagree that it's our duty to protect refugees and asylum seekers. If you look at whether Northern Ireland is a welcoming society, we have 43% who agree that it is. We also have 16% who disagree. Now, the data was collected before the incidents, right? So the data collection took place around Easter time, so that would not be affected by that. But it gives a general sense of where young people's attitudes are in relation to that. And then maybe the last one that I want to highlight here, the opportunities to get to know asylum seekers, 6%. So that's approximately just over one third of 16-year-olds agreed with that. Okay, kids' life and times. And something that's also being discussed a lot is mobile phone use. And that's something that we occasionally revisit. So that was included in the first Kids' Life and Times survey in 2008. We asked the proportion of children who had mobile phones, and we asked it again in this year. And you can see that 87% of P7 children have a personal mobile phone. That's actually over time. I'm not sure if we can talk about the time change, probably not, but it's certainly lower than it was before in 2013 and in 2008, so it's gone slightly down. But 84% have almost always access to the internet, and 88% say that they almost every day use the internet at home. Now these are 10 or 11 year olds, right? No, probably a good news story here is that 97% did say that they've been taught about how to use the internet safely, and that's gone up from 2013. Again, I'm slightly hesitant to pretend that there's some sort of trend, but it's certainly almost everybody said that they've been taught how to use how to stay safe online. 51% said they can have access to the internet whenever they want. And when I talk to parents who have P7 children or primary school children, they often say, "Oh, I limit it to an hour, or limit it to 2 hours a day," or something like that. Well, half of them have no limits, right? At least half of them. And lastly, only 13% of the P7 children did say that their parents know nothing or just a little about what they're doing online. Okay, we will have a more comprehensive module on mobile phone use and mobile bullying and things like that in Young Life and Times next year among young people. Considering the data we have on online violence, it's probably really timely to do that, to have a look at that. So, yeah, that funding is in place. Okay, and this is a fun bit. To finish off on a light note, we asked the children what they want to do in the future. Okay, if that is true, then after watching Northern Ireland play a dismal 2-0 against Luxembourg yesterday, we should be alright in future because they're all going to be footballers, so it should be a good number of people to pick from. So, footballer or teacher? This seems to be the alternatives, which is really interesting. And then, just to finish off, we have some individuals